This episode is brought to you by Mike Scott Voice. If you're an author or publisher interested in having your written works produced as audiobooks, give narrator Mike Scott a shout at MikeScottVoice.com. Audiobook narrator Mike Scott, the voice of history.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this exciting episode of Addressing Gettysburg. I am your host, Matt Callery, and sitting in as a guest co-host with us today, Eric, is none other than the great Jessie Wheedleton. Hello, Jessie.
The only
Jessie Wheedleton. The great and the only. You've been on, how many shows have you been on? 3 or 4?
Probably 3.
Probably 3. You were on the very first Ask a Gettysburg Guide, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. I still believe that is the highest amount of downloads that episode has. Of the Ask a Guides, I believe it has the highest.
I had one sentence on Outdoors with Charlie Fennell at Culp's Hill.
Oh, yeah.
You weren't actually on that one, though, right?
Yeah, she was.
Well,
she was?
She just didn't have that much of a speaking part, I guess.
Oh, you didn't assert yourself, is what you're saying.
Yes.
You let everybody talk over you, is what it was?
She brought Ginny Weed, and she was
I remember Ginny was there.
And her jingles were heard in the background.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you said you just wanted to come and observe that one, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, but we gave her a mic.
Gave her a microphone anyway. Right. Well,
kind of
no,
like
this one you are actually up in the hot seat as the co-host. Okay. So we've got a lot of things.
I'm here to grill Phil.
Yes, you're going to grill Phil. Phil Cole is our guest today. We'll get to him in just one moment there. I gotta get all this housekeeping out of the way here for you folks, and then we're going to move on to our guest. We're talking artillery today. It's going to be a blast.
Oh my.
Okay, all right.
Wow.
First, I'd like to start by welcoming our new and our first paying advertisers to the Addressing Gettysburg family. You've heard their commercials for a while, but I haven't actually spoken about them quite yet, but now we're going to do that. Plowman Cider is one of them. They have the tap room on the square here in Gettysburg, but they also ship to most U.S. states. If you go to plowmancider.com, and if you see your state as one of the states that they can go and ship to, got to be 21, though. Do yourself a favor and order a sampling of their delicious Adams County grown and produced ciders. And make sure you use the promo code CIDERPOD so that you get 15% off, and they know advertising with us is working. And also at the top of the show, you heard the spot for Mike Scott Voice. Anybody out there who has audiobooks, I mean, I'm sure Mike would do on any subject. He likes doing history books, but I'm pretty confident when I say that he would do a book about just about anything, if you want to hire him. So go to MikeScottVoice.com and contact Mike about that. And also look for, I should say, in the coming weeks and months for The Historian jumping on board, which is my favorite bookstore in town. I was actually just there today. I go there like once or twice a week, Eric, and I drop like $30 on used books or something.
Yeah, I had to stop going in there for some time because I was buying books that were decorating my library shelves, and
which were already full
and actually read. Yeah,
I can't resist when I go down York Street and I see that table of used books out for $1. I'm like, I got to see what he's got today.
I have a hard time walking out of a bookstore without buying anything.
Yeah, me too. And you know the Time Life series, the silver books?
The silver ones? Yeah.
So I thought that when they came out, I thought I had them all. And I was looking through the master index and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have that book. And I don't know if I lost them over the years or we canceled the subscription before I got them all, or I don't know what happened.
That's what I did.
You canceled?
Yeah.
No. Well, so there's 5 or 6 that I don't have.
Oh.
There's 27 in there, and I have, do the math, Veronica, I can't figure it out. And so I went into For the Historian, and boom, right on that table today were 2 of the ones I don't have.
Nice.
So I got them, and I went inside. I got a couple more.
It's a score.
Talked to Larry about that. So anyway, For the Historian, great prices, thousands of titles ranging in subject throughout history, and best of all, for you folks that are not in Gettysburg, they ship. And that is the key to surviving the winter, isn't it? Shipping, folks. Excuse me. We love Gettysburg here. I think everybody in this room can agree, right? Don't we all love Gettysburg? Big round of applause for Gettysburg.
Yay, okay?
Gettysburg. Thank you. 2 people clapped. But we really do. We love Gettysburg, and we hate to see how businesses have suffered during the shutdowns of 2020. And winter is hard enough already without shutdowns. Isn't that right? So we want to do everything we can to help everybody get through this winter. We don't know if we're going to have more or what, but that's it. So we're looking for sponsors who are accessible anywhere in the world, that they could ship to you and things like that. So when you hear them on here, it's not something that we have in there so it sounds like a radio show. Like, these are actual people who are advertising on our show, and they want to reach you. They want to bring their services to you. And I know you guys are an awesome audience. You're very receptive to our advice on things to do and places to see and all that stuff. And I hear from you. And so we choose them wisely. We approach only the ones that we think would be good for our audience. We're not going to take anybody's money. Right, Veronica? That's crazy, isn't it? Crazy. I agree.
We're selective.
So please patronize our sponsors when you hear something that you like. Check them out. What else? Oh, the Today Show finally aired.
Finally.
On January 22nd.
Indeed.
Did you see it?
Oh, yeah, I saw the link.
Jessie, were you upset because...
I was upset because even though I was very happy to be in the B-roll, they used our rain footage. Not like when I actually I do my hair maybe 5 times a year. And
I saw that she was like in her parka with the hood up.
I was miserable.
It was a miserable day. Yeah.
It was a rainy
Matt
day.
had a very warm, shining moment. Everybody enjoyed it that watched it.
Yeah, well, thanks. But I was really bummed because I was so proud of the work that you guys did and we all did together on the virtual tour of the Bryan
more
farm.
People could have seen. But
And the only clips of it were clips of, it was like B-roll of just me walking through the Bryan house. It wasn't even you guys. And that's what really did bum me out. Like, people were like, congratulations. And do you like it? Do you like it? And I'm like, no, I'm bummed.
The podcast was pretty forward at the beginning.
Yeah, it was right there in the beginning.
You know,
we had that in the background.
Logo.
Yeah.
It's a good thing we shot that because
Thank God.
yeah, because they're like, hey, do you have like any other footage of you doing the podcast? We're like, no, but we'll fake it. So that was just Eric on a cell phone faking it. So. But yeah, anyway, that aired. So I just want to thank all of you for your kind words and your congratulations. Look for a show on Patreon. We're going to get everybody together, yourself included, whoever else among the guides, Lewis, Bob, who had anything to do with the Today Show. Even if it didn't make it to the final cut, we want to talk about what it was like to make it, and what we want to talk about is what wasn't shown on the Today Show. Lots of scandalous stuff.
Have you noticed any spike in numbers since?
Yeah, we got two new followers.
We got more than that, but it wasn't like we went from 1,700 Facebook followers to 20,000 overnight. It was we've got.
But it probably will by the time this airs.
By the time this airs, but that's not because of the Today Show. That's because of you and Phil. Let's be honest.
That's where it comes.
But no, but we had. We had not really anticipated, or I should say we didn't expect anything. Well, really, I think what we got is about what we expected, right, Eric?
Yeah, like a few. I mean, honestly, the Today Show isn't really marketing to the same audience that we are necessarily.
No, that's exactly right. Like it's not. It's not a history audience. It's a touchy-feely audience.
Yeah,
that's why it was a touchy-feely show.
Different people, but it's great exposure either way.
Either way. I did get some emails from people who said, hey, I just saw you on the Today Show. And then they would ask me, a question or whatever.
Yeah.
But like 4 or 5 of them, I think.
But I think the title Addressing Gettysburg is...
Like we're yelling at Gettysburg?
Well, if nobody really
down.
has had experience with Gettysburg, that they're like, oh, the Gettysburg Address, that's probably all they know.
Well, that's the idea of the name.
Yeah, well,
it's like you use what they know.
And that's the crowd that would
they could just
be the most
they could just equate
to
this to being a podcast about Abraham Lincoln.
It's talking
in the
Do you have any episodes about Abraham Lincoln?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
In our heads.
No.
We haven't actually done them yet.
Admitting how many I've listened to.
Yeah. Yes, we have 42 of them about Abraham Lincoln, actually. No, but you know what, though? What really I think was bigger news to our listeners, at least, this weekend. Now, the Today Show aired on Friday the 22nd, and then on Sunday the 24th, I announced the big news that everybody seems to be wild about, which is
the segue coming up.
Tom Berenger.
Here it is.
Tom Berenger, General Longstreet from the movie Gettysburg, is going to be on a special edition of Ask a Gettysburg Guide. As you know, we did one with Bo Brinkman back in October?
No,
September. August, September, October, November. Yeah. From General Lee's headquarters, thanks to the American Battlefield Trust. So that, every once in a while we'll have an actor on. We'll call it Ask a Gettysburg actor. And we put the word Gettysburg in quotes because we're talking about the movie. Anyway.
Master of wordplay.
Yes. So, anyway, that's going to be a Tom Berenger. Now, listen, I'm opening the questions up to anybody and everybody who wants to ask a question. However, I think I have to already put an end to it.
Cut it off, yeah.
Because I've got like almost 80 of them now. So that's too much. So I got it. So I'm not taking any more questions. By the time this comes out, this is a moot point. I have to announce it on social media. But for those of you who didn't get in, I am going to ask him about the beard and the hat during my part of the interview. So when we get to the part of listener questions, let's have some good ones because the competition is stiff here. We got dozens and dozens and dozens of people who sent in questions, some 2 or 3, and many of them are a repeat of questions we already have. And they're not bad questions. I'm not saying this. I'm just saying we have a lot of the same questions. So put your thinking caps on. What would Barbara Walters ask Tom Berenger? Okay. What would the late, great Larry King, what would he ask Tom Berenger? Think of that way and then send that question in. Oh, no, actually, don't send that question in. What am I saying? I just said I'm not taking questions. I'm telling you how to question.
It's too late. Don't bother sending questions in.
The point I'm trying to make is it's Bo Brinkman is to thank for this. Bo has been working on him for 2 months almost to get Tom to relent. And he didn't have to twist his arm or anything, but he just, had to say, hey, you got to do this podcast with this guy. So he finally said, all right, give him my number. And we made it happen. I spoke to him for 4 hours the other night on the phone.
Oh.
And it's a very interesting conversation. So I think it's going to be a really good interview. So thank you to Bo for that. Bo is also going to co-host. He's going to be in Jessie's chair. And he and I are going to interview Tom on February 4th. So that should be fun and it should be interesting. Okay. God, man, I am so sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Phil, I'm sorry to you for making you wait. Oops, for making you wait this long.
Now I know what that episode's going to be like.
Yeah.
Poor Tom. Talking for 3 hours.
This episode is dedicated to Joe Denise, who is a patron, and he's the man who donated about half of the parts for our new computer, and he put it together. So thank you, Joe. This is your episode. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Make sure you have your notifications turned on. Also, if you use the Apple Podcast app, please leave a 5-star review. Reviews, liking, sharing, and subscribing are the best ways for us to help our audience grow. Okay. Our guest and our subject today. Our guest is Philip M. Cole. Our subject is artillery, Civil War artillery. Phil's from Gettysburg, born and raised. He's a veteran. He's worked on the battlefield you started in the maintenance department. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Became a licensed battlefield guide. Graduated Penn State with a BS in accounting. Regional manager for Reynolds Metal Companies. Started marketing business in 1981, eventually evolving into book publishing. He's also authored 3 titles: Civil War Artillery at Gettysburg, Command and Communication Frictions in the Gettysburg Campaign, and You'll Be Scared, Sure You'll Be Scared, Fear, Stress, and Coping in the Civil War. Phil Cole is our guest today. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go into you a little bit more. Tell us more about your life. What did you do before you became a guide? Why'd you want to become a guide? All that stuff.
Well, you just explained it all.
No, there's more than that.
No, I got out of the Navy. I needed a job.
Okay.
First, I worked with the maintenance. Then I took the guide test, and I passed that. Worked for perhaps 10 years, moved to different places for Reynolds Metals Company. Come back, got my guide license again, had to take the test again. And
Why'd you have to take it again?
if you're away for 10 years, you have to prove that you remember what you
really?
told them before.
Okay, okay.
I don't know, Jessie, maybe you know, if you take off a couple years, you have to retake it.
Yeah, you're only allowed 2 like sabbatical years, and if you take off for more than that, there were people that were trying to come back in when I took my test that
had
have to
left
wait.
before.
So if you
Yeah.
give it
Okay.
up, you're going to have to compete with a lot of smarter people.
So what was
telling
the
you.
difference that you noticed in the 2 tests that you took?
I think it's tougher because you're competing. Back then you could get 70 and pass. Today, if they want the top 15, you can have a 95 and fail because they've got 15 or 14 other people above you.
Right, so very much graded on the curve.
Yeah.
No.
So you got some pretty interesting family history here. Your great-great-grandfather
Nicholas Kadori.
owned the Kadori farm.
Yeah.
So where Pickett's division crossed
Right.
was his property. He didn't live there at the time of the battle, though, right?
No, I think it was the Stobbs that lived there.
Okay.
He lived at what is now the Brafferton Inn in Gettysburg.
Right, the Kadori house.
Yes.
Yes. Now, that building on the square, that store, Kadori's, does that have anything
First cousin of mine. Yeah.
First cousin of yours?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a current Kadori.
We're all descendants of Nicholas Kadori.
Interesting.
Of that branch. There are other Kadoris out in the West Coast. George Kadori was captured by the Confederate Army. And his descendants live across the country.
What is the ethnic origin of that name?
They were born in Alsace, France.
France, okay.
It's on the German border.
It sounded Italian to me, but it didn't make any sense that it would be Italian.
Yeah,
But
I
okay.
visited the
That makes sense.
homestead. In fact, their descendants, or my ancestors, the Kadoris from France, visited here about 10 years ago.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, there are 3 monuments on the battlefield that have something to do with your family as well.
Right.
What is that?
The Peace Light, the executive secretary was Paul Roy. It was my uncle.
The executive secretary of the commission to get the monument.
He had to go to the Southern conventions and try to beg the Confederates to come to the reunion. They didn't want to come. They couldn't fly their flags. So I have a recording of him in 1935 in Amarillo, Texas, where he was to speak. They don't want him to speak. The man in charge, a general, I forget his name, Harry Lee, something like that. And my uncle said, well, let me tell you what I'm going to say. And Harry said after he told him what he was going to say, he says, why don't you tell me that beforehand? He said, let's go into the bar and have a drink. So the height of my uncle's speech to these Confederate veterans, and you can fly your flags at Gettysburg. You hear all this Confederate whooping and yelling. Pretty interesting. Then my grandmother's horse, Dolly, was used as the model for the 1st Massachusetts Cavalry.
the monument
That's
over
next
by
to
Sedgwick. Yeah.
statue. Yeah.
Okay. So they used a local horse as the model for that.
Yeah.
Oh, see, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that.
And her father was a Civil War veteran who owned Gettysburg Hotel. The Dillers.
Okay.
There were a bunch of them. There's 6 of them. They weighed over 300 pounds after the war. They called them the Ton of Dillers from Hanover, Pennsylvania.
These are big people for the mid-19th
Yeah.
century.
I thought you were talking about the horses for a second. I'm like, well, wait, that's an emaciated horse.
Anyhow, that was the second one. The other one is the 11th Mississippi. James Kadori Memorials today.
Right.
He supplied the base for that monument.
Oh, all right, cool.
So they're the 3 connections.
Kadori Memorials, I mean, I assume this for
yeah.
sure, but now I know. They are descendants of Nicholas Kadori.
And the one in the square, he passed away, but they still retain the name Kadori Gift Shop.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's a store.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And then it says here you participated in the filming of the movie Gettysburg. What'd you do in Gettysburg?
Died, was wounded, came alive, wore Confederate uniform, Union uniform.
See, whatever they needed.
Yeah.
What scene can you pick yourself out?
You'd be blurred in the background if you looked at it, but there was one day I wore a straw hat, and in the first part of the movie where Lee hears this cannon fire in Gettysburg, he's at Cashtown, and he asks this general, "Whose guns are those?" Mm-hmm. I think that was...
There's Major Taylor. He asked Bo Brinkman, he asked, "Major Taylor, are those our guns?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyhow, the general he's talking to, he's, "My boys, my boys," they get excited, right? Remember that part?
Yeah, I think that's later.
Anyhow.
The scene you're talking about was with Longstreet and Taylor.
There's supposed to be 300 reenactors show up the day. 100 showed up. So what you're seeing on the screen is different. We're walking around these two generals in a circle.
Oh, yeah.
I saw my hat go by once, twice, 3 times, that straw hat.
So now I'm going to go watch that tonight.
And it's the same wagon going by. I think they had one wagon.
I think that is that scene when he hears the artillery, because Bo's told me about that, and he mentioned the circling of the extras. Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds like a pretty fun and interesting Gettysburg-filled life that you've had there, and your book, Civil War Artillery at Gettysburg, is kind of we're gonna talk about artillery in general, right?
Sure.
But that's the book that you all can go and get if you want to learn a little bit more about our artillery here at Gettysburg. In the meantime, let's start with this here. Now, why don't we start with the basic stuff? Organization.
Okay.
How did both armies organize their artillery?
Okay. Union batteries had 6 guns. Confederate batteries had 4. They wanted 6, but they didn't have enough horses or equipment to beef them up.
Okay.
The glaring difference, though, was the composition of each type of battery. The Union batteries had all identical models except for one. Confederates had mixed cannons in the same battery of 4. You could have smoothbore mixed with rifle. You could have different kind of rifle models in the same battery. 3 of the 4 guns might be different. So here's the problem. If you have different models, it requires different ammunition.
Yeah.
Each Confederate cannon used 4 different kinds of ammunition. So you have 3 of the 4 guns different. You have to go to 12 different wagons to replenish your ammunition. So there's a problem. There's different safety procedures. If you go from one gun to the other, different aiming procedures, different projectiles, different tables of fire for the projectile to fly to the enemy, the time it takes to cut the fuses, a lot of technical problems in that case.
So how would they use a mixed battery? Like, I mean, let's say you've got 2 rifles and 2 smoothbores.
Yes.
Would you have the rifles a little further back and the smoothbores a little closer?
Good point.
Yeah.
It negates one side or the other. If you need close range artillery for using cannons, for example,
right,
the Napoleons had double the killing power of rifle guns
with canister.
But if you want to hit the enemy more than the range of a Napoleon, they're out of action. Those Napoleons. Right.
So if you're doing some, let's say you've got a situation like Pickett's Charge where you've got I don't know if that would work. Well, let's just say hypothetically, you've got a situation where you've got a mile or more distance and you have got troops coming across a field and you're a mixed battery, and let's say you're full strength, half of your guns are going to be effective and the other half are not until you get within a mile, right. And then all 4 are going to be. Did that make that much of a difference for the Confederate Army?
Probably not in Pickett's Charge.
Okay.
In fact, you can squeeze more range out of a Napoleon with a 1 mile range by ricochet firing.
Yeah.
You can bounce the ball.
The solid,
Did you see the movie The Patriot?
Yes.
Remember the ball bounce? That's ricochet firing.
Mm-hmm.
They did that for a different reason. To slow it down, if it goes too fast, it goes through an object. If you slow it down, it explodes the object.
Okay.
Plus, it's a psychological effect bouncing towards you, right?
Yes. I would not want to look at that.
So, like, for example, on Seminary Ridge, during Pickett's Charge, the Napoleons of a lot of the further batteries, like near the armory, kind of that area, they had their Napoleons sent back just to wait behind everybody.
In case there was a counterattack, you mean?
Yeah, they probably would have moved them back if that had been the case, but the guys in those batteries didn't really know or with those sections, didn't really know what was going on.
Okay, gotcha.
But if you're closer, like as you get a little bit closer toward the North Carolina monument, they were keeping some of theirs online because on the second day, they could actually reach toward the peach orchard area with those. So they were kind of trying to get the peach orchard from the flank on the second day. So they kept some of them. So it's up to whoever's in charge, where if he feels it's worth it to keep the Napoleons close by or to just send them off, out of the way.
Okay. So we've got how they're organized now. So then what do you do? Well, now you got them organized. How do you use them? How do you deploy them, and what are they?
Well, they formed brigades or battalions.
Okay.
Brigades were for the Union side. They had 5 batteries to a brigade. Confederates had battalions. They had 4 batteries to a battalion.
Okay. And would they put? So I know they would have a battalion in the Confederate Army would be attached to a division, correct?
Yes, 1 battalion to each division.
And they did the same in the Union Army,
and 1
right?
brigade to a corps.
To a corps, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so would they split the batteries up and send them out to different smaller units like brigades or whatever, or how would they use them? Would they fight it
they had
as a
reserve.
battalion? Okay.
You have a self-contained group of cannons in your jurisdiction, but the Union Army had 1 big central reserve. They had 5 brigades to the reserve. That's a lot of cannon.
Yeah.
The nice thing about that for the Union side, if it's centrally located, the roads running into the rear of the Union lines are parallel. They can bring in tons of equipment, bring in soldiers, cannons. They feed them right to the rear of the line. Now, the Confederate Reserves, they had 2 battalions to a corps. So here's a self-contained group of infantry and cannons in the same battlefront.
Mm-hmm.
So the corps commander could send those reserves any place within his corps zone.
Okay.
They're covering like a 2-mile front for each of the 3 Confederate corps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So right. Go ahead.
So what would you say? I'll try to be the co-host here. So what would you say are the key times during the battle that reserve really had the advantage over the Confederates?
Well, they really needed it in the second day. McGilvery's reserves were brought in, and also the third day. The McGilvery line on July the 3rd,
Just
down Hancock Avenue.
And like replenishing ammunition and everything as well.
Yes. And so you have that central reserve for the Union side. You can't borrow cannons from a different corps in the Confederate side. Well, you could, but you're probably going to have some problems. You have to go through a permission chain of command. And another thing I mentioned about parallel roads, all the roads into the Confederate line are perpendicular. So if you bring in equipment to the rear of the Confederate line at the end of that road, you've got to go across terrain, which is not very conducive to pulling.
Right, I never thought about
artillery.
the roads being
Yeah.
perpendicular on the Confederate side.
It's different. What is the there is no Army reserve in the Confederate Army, the Army of Northern Virginia, correct?
You mean
For the artillery, like at
men?
Army level? No. For reserve artillery, is there, like we have Hunt and the artillery reserve in the Army of the Potomac? Does the Army of Northern Virginia have that, or is it at the corps level?
They had 2 battalions to each corps.
Right. So it's at the
split
corps.
amongst
They have
the
it
corps.
at
It's
the
within
corps
the
level.
corps level.
Right.
So you got to there's no chain of command other than the corps commander to send wherever he wanted.
So Lee can't. Well, I mean, he can, but it would take longer to order support artillery to any part of the line because he'd have to take it from one corps and send it to another.
You'd probably go to the next corps adjacent to you and ask that commander.
So that would actually occur between corps, in other words.
Yeah, cooperation.
So Ewell would ask Hill or something like that.
So
Okay.
you have a 2-mile front there. Look at the Union. They have 7 corps, 3-mile line.
Yeah.
That's about a half a mile front.
Yeah.
So if you're going to ask to borrow to the adjacent corps, they probably won't want to do it because they're being attacked at the same time you're being attacked on a wide front like that.
Yeah, because you're all scrunched in there together. Yeah, okay, I see. So let's get into a little bit here before we get even bigger into the whole artillery thing. Let's just start on a single piece. Mm-hmm. We've got rifled pieces. We've got smooth bores. For the benefit of the people who are new to all this, what is the difference between rifled and smooth bores? And when they come to Gettysburg and they're looking around at all the cannons without having to go up to one and read anything about it, how can they tell which is which?
Well, the green guns, for the most part, are smooth bores. There are a few exceptions, but almost all are smooth bores. Smooth bores fired round ammunition. And it's all one piece when you load a smooth bore. You got the powder cartridge attached to the projectile. They put it down. If it's a rifled gun, you have a two-step process. You put in the cartridge first and then the projectile.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more time to do that.
The smooth bores are a wider diameter?
Yes. They fire round ammunition, and that ball's got to be smaller than the bore itself, about 1/10 of an inch. It's called windage. If you don't have windage, you're going to have the barrel build up with a film where you can't keep putting more ammunition in.
Okay.
So you need the windage, but with the windage, you're going to have the propellant gas leak through that gap, and you're going to lose a lot of propellant force. So it took 1 pound of gunpowder, 2.5 pounds of gunpowder to send the projectile 1 mile. But the rifle projectiles change shape in the barrel. They have a base or something in the center that will seal the propellant gas in.
Like a soft lead attachment or something?
Yeah.
And that would expand and catch in the grooves?
So it took 1 pound to send it 2 miles.
Okay.
That's efficient.
Yeah. It's like a Magnum. Isn't that how Magnums work? They're like pinched pretty tight or something?
Yeah. Or
right?
even the mini ball. Same principle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure.
So, okay. What would now? So, the rifled gun, which I don't know if you said it or not, they're the black guns on the battlefield. Right. That's a newer technology. When did rifling come out with the cannons?
It's not a new process. It was invented in the 1500s initially to allow you to keep loading more bullets because the barrel would clog up with that film. I think the original rifling were straight. They weren't spiral. So
that was more of a keeping it clean type of a thing.
Yes.
Yeah, you're talking
then
centuries
Manet
before.
Invented the mini ball, the bullet. So the shape of that captured the propellant gas, and it twirled or spiraled the bullet out, which made it more stable.
Like it's the difference between throwing a spiral football and a wobbly little football, right?
You read my book. You take a note. Or taking a javelin and throw it from the back end of a javelin. You can't control it. You need to spin it.
Right. Okay. So the in the United States Army, when did they start adopting rifled guns? Was that during the war or before the war?
So they have to adapt to a lot of things. You got to get new manuals, new tables of fire. The projectile operates differently. You got a lot of problems with different manufacturers of ammunition and weapons. The shell doesn't always go to the same place if it's the same model and the same type of projectile. Different manufacturers had different quality problems. But one thing, there are different spiral rifled barrels between your Parrot,
yes,
one of the
what
popular ones, and your 3-inch ordnance rifle. Mm-hmm. So you have different lands and grooves, different spirals, different rates of spiral. They had Whitworth guns here, which spun 6 times faster than any other projectile here. You got to spin that thing for 5 miles before it hits. If the spin wears off, it'll tumble. You'll never hit your target.
So now you're getting into something that I wanted to get into. So we said that there are 2 classes, rifled and smoothbore.
Right.
But within those classes, there are different models, different types of guns.
Yes.
Okay, so smooth bores, we've got Napoleons, we've got what else? Howitzers.
You got howitzers, 6 pound, 12, 20.
So this is another thing,
24
6 pound, 12 pound. So let's go into that. Let's start with the smooth bores.
Okay.
The different models that you have in the smooth bores and what all these terms mean. You said 6 pound, 12 pound.
They had one 6 pounder, I believe. They had most commonly were the 12 pounders and then the 24 pounder.
Okay.
They were actually obsolete by the time the war came about, but the South is desperate of any kind of weapons to get a hold of. And then you also had...
Are they cheaper to make than rifle
No,
guns?
they're more expensive.
They're more expensive to make. So were these bronze smooth bores, were they laying around? Is that why there are more of them? Like when the war started, I'm saying, did they have them easily accessible that they could steal them from arsenals, or how do they get a hold of them?
Confederates?
Yes.
40% of your Southern guns were Yankee made.
Okay.
They just captured 28 at about a Winchester on the way up from to Gettysburg.
So a lot of them are captured in battle, and so when they start the war, what are they using for their artillery?
Napoleons, they go back to like 1856, I believe.
Okay.
So they introduced the rifled guns, but now you're switching from smoothbore technology to rifle technology. You're giving up the killing power of a smoothbore at close range. You're gaining range, but you don't win battles at long range, do you?
No. You got to...
Correct me if I'm wrong, Phil.
Yes.
There's I think 12 or 24 pound howitzers on South Confederate Avenue. I think there's
both.
two.
One's
okay.
near the Louisiana Monument, Texas or Mississippi Monument.
Okay.
They're, I believe, 24 pounders. There were two made in Austria right there.
Yeah, with the...
The
really?
intersection. You'll see in the back, WIEN means Vienna.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And there's one 6 pounder near the Texas Monument, I believe. Some they took 6 pounders and bored them out to make them look like a 12 pounder.
Okay.
I did mention the James guns. These are rifled Napoleons.
Yeah.
They had a special kind of projectile for them.
Well, and those are the green tubes that don't have that like bell at the muzzle, right?
No, they do.
They're just straightforward.
Oh no, they're bronze
about
tubes that
Napoleons?
look like 3-inch ordnance. Is that what you're talking about?
They're James, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The James rifles are in the Connecticut. Is it the 2nd Connecticut Artillery?
Sterling,
Yeah.
That's
2nd Connecticut
by
Light.
by Father Corby.
Okay.
The shape of them is
And
the
they're in
same as
their
the
original
3-inch
condition.
ordnance rifle, but it's bronze. Is that right? Is that what we're talking about? The James?
I guess you could say that.
They,
yeah.
I believe they're smaller.
Yeah,
But they have
don't know
that
the exact
tapered
dimension.
shape, is what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
yeah.
Yeah, they have it's big at the
They look
breech.
like a mini 3-inch ordnance rifle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now there's some rifled Napoleons in the cemetery, Eakins Battery.
And over by the
experimentally.
peach orchard too, right?
Yeah, I don't know if they used them here,
Okay.
but what they tried out to fire an iron projectile out of a bronze cannon. Bronze is a lot softer than iron.
Yeah.
So it's going to wear those grooves or the lands down very quickly.
All right, so let's get back on track though here because we're kind of getting in the weeds. So we're still in.
You wanted to get in the weeds.
Well, I want to get in the weeds,
We're
but I want to do it in an organized
That's
way.
the way
so,
we always function.
so the listener doesn't go crazy. So okay,
You need a whistle.
maybe we're still in the smooth bores now. Okay, what is the difference between a Napoleon and a howitzer?
Howitzers are short, stubby-barreled things. They don't have the range, but they're good defensive weapons. They wanted
think-
those 9 howitzers out and pick a charge. They disappeared, didn't they?
Right, because what they're good for is aiming above,
Yes.
getting the.
High arc.
Yeah.
So would it be accurate to say that it's kind of between a Napoleon and a mortar? The way it's a shorter barrel, it's got a higher parabola
Somewhat,
that I can
yeah.
travel on, but it's not a mortar, but it kind of has that
Higher arc.
lobbing effect as opposed to direct fire,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Now, you said before 6 pound, 12 pound. So people get confused. They think that the cannon weighs 6 or 12 pounds, but we know this is not true. What does it actually mean?
It fired a projectile that weighed 6, 12, or 24 pounds.
Okay. So that's just for the benefit
If
of
the cannon weighed
people that
12
get
pounds, we'd
confused.
all have one in our living room.
And usually the barrel weighs
Yes, we would.
I'd have one right on this table.
usually the barrel weighs 100 pounds more than the projectile it fired. So you have a 12-pound Napoleon The barrel weighs 1,200 pounds.
Oh, gotcha.
You fire a 10-pound Parrot, it weighs 900 plus pounds.
Okay.
Rule of thumb.
Okay. So now you mentioned the Parrot, so let's go over to the rifled guns, the black tubes that you see on the field. So the rifling, what are the different models of rifled guns that we'll find?
The 3-inch Ordnance rifle and the Parrot. They had some other ones here. They had 20-pound Parrots. They're down by the tower, by the Eisenhower farm.
Yeah.
And one group of guns that weren't, they're in the Army of Potomac. They didn't make it to the battle. 4.5 inches. It's like a big brother to the 3-inch Ordnance rifle.
Is that the one, the headquarters markers?
They're it. Yeah.
Is that them?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So those are 4-inch?
They fired a 30-pound shell.
Jeez.
They had to pull them with siege carriages.
Yeah. And they actually took those out into the field.
They never made it to Gettysburg. I think they're in Maryland someplace.
But the effort was made to get them out into the field. Wow. Jeez. Okay, so the Parrot guns, how would somebody identify the Parrot guns versus the 3-inch Ordnance?
They have the shrunken band on the back to reinforce it.
Okay.
Parrots are made out of cast iron. If you want to kill people, make it out of cast iron.
Why is that?
That's what the explosive shells. They shatter like glass.
Uh-huh.
They blow up and kill the gun crew.
Yes.
They called them widowmakers. The inventor said, "I know they're not perfect, but iron is cheap and it's plentiful." Boy, that makes me feel good buying them.
Right. So,
but, one thing to interject, they had 2 different calibers of Parrots here. The Confederates, they had 2.9 inch and a 3-inch.
okay.
There were 3 batteries that issued the wrong kind. And one including was Jones Battalion out the Harrisburg Road. 2 guns were out of action. They're trying to stick a 3-inch projectile into a 2.9-inch barrel.
That math doesn't work.
And all the Union Parrots were 2.9 incher here.
Okay.
You can tell them by the little flared end of the Parrot.
All right.
You go to North Carolina Monument, you can see both of them. The 2.9 with the flared and also the 3-inch with the straight barrel front to back.
I always wondered what the difference was between those tubes, why one had a flared muzzle and the other one
The Union
didn't.
Army adopted the 3-inch after Gettysburg.
Okay.
So all the Union guns are 2.9-inch Parrots. They're on Little Round Top. They're in Smith's Battery by Devil's Den.
Okay.
And that's something that we should probably let the person who hasn't been here before know, is that when you go around on the battlefield and you see these cannon, a lot of them are Civil War cannons.
Yes.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that they were here at the Battle of Gettysburg.
No, I hear different stories. I know the 3 that were here for sure. One, of course, fired the first shot, and some other ones. They said something about a part missing on gun barrel such and such. They have a serial number in the end, of course.
Okay.
Gun 233 fired the first shot.
Right. What are the other? You said there were 3 that.
Well, then there are other ones that aren't on the field that you can prove were here.
Oh, that we know that we're here. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So the Parrots have those reinforcing bands on the back. You've got 10-pound Parrots and 20-pound Parrots. So, but you got the pounds again. They're related to the weight of the projectile,
the solid projectile.
But then you also have diameter of the projectile that you have to take into consideration with these guns that you don't have to worry about with the smooth bores. Yeah,
they had those 2 different calibers of
Right.
Parrots. By the way, that wrought iron band on the back was wrought iron.
Okay.
To reinforce it.
So it was a cast iron tube with a wrought iron barrel on the back. So construction-wise, besides the reinforcing band on the back, how was a 3-inch Ordnance tube constructed versus a...
They're all wrought iron.
They're all wrought iron, so it's the same.
I know no case where they actually blew up in the Civil War. They're 100 pounds lighter than a 10-pound Parrot.
Mm-hmm. The 3-inch Ordnance, were those... Which ones were cheaper to make, the 3-inch Ordnance or the Parrots? Or were they about the same?
I wrote that book 18 years ago.
The Parrot guns.
The Parrot guns were cheaper?
Yeah, the Parrot guns were cheaper.
Why?
Thank you.
You didn't have to. So there's an extra step in the manufacturing process between a 3-inch Ordnance rifle and a Parrot gun.
Right.
With a Parrot gun, you're just casting that iron into whatever final shape you want it with, some finish machining to the tube. But for the most part, once it comes out of the mold, that's what you're going to get with a 3-inch ordnance rifle. You have to make a billet of iron. So you take a chunk of basically raw pig iron and you beat it with a giant mechanical hammer into this billet that's going to be, the stock that you're going to turn that barrel out of. So you're not casting into like a rough shape and then doing finish machining on it. You're taking this giant rectangular block of iron, putting it into a lathe and turning the barrel down into the final shape, which is, it's a lot more costly manufacturing wise to do it that way. I mean, material, there's not that big of a difference in the material cost. It's labor.
Right. It's always labor. So, okay, I think the audience now has an idea of what we're dealing with as far as what the guns themselves are made out of and what they shoot. But, you watch the movies and, whatever they're shooting, they fire it at someone and boom, big explosion, people go flying in the air. Certainly there are rounds that would come out of these guns that would do something like that, but not all of them. And so what are the rounds like? You mentioned before that the smooth bores fire round shot. Mm-hmm. Is there just one type of ammunition that they fire, or
4 different kinds?
Four different kinds. What are we looking at?
Shot, the solid one.
Solid shot. So solid ball of iron.
Yes.
Okay.
Case shot. Shell blew up in fewer pieces. Canister.
So case would be hollow with balls inside, powder charge,
ignited either from a time fuse or a contact fuse. Mm-hmm. You had to use a time fuse in a Napoleon because that fuse has to ignite when it leaves the barrel.
So explain the fuse part.
Well, if that fuse is not pointed towards the enemy when it leaves the barrel, it could blow up in the barrel. You want the flame to come around the ball and ignite the fuse.
Okay.
So you can't use a contact fuse. You don't know where that ball is going to hit.
Yes.
What point of the ball is going to hit the detonator.
Because
you need a contact.
Slowly kind of turning in the air, unlike a spin.
Yeah.
Right? So the firing of the gun actually ignites the fuse. It's not like you got a match and you light a fuse and you drop it down the barrel and it's actually
that's for smooth bore.
Yeah. So right, okay.
Or you could use it in a rifle.
Would that work that way in a rifle?
Yeah, here's a neat invention the Confederates had. Because it was so efficient trapping that flame behind the projectile, sometimes it wouldn't ignite the fuse in the front. Uh-huh. So they put what they call flame grooves on the side, parallel. Did you ever see those before? Anyhow,
no, I haven't.
The flame leaked through the grooves and ignited the power.
So they would make a groove just big enough to get the flame in there
on the shell itself.
Yeah,
no,
on the shell.
On the shell.
Shell, yeah.
That's interesting. And
I've seen that before, but didn't put it together.
Yeah.
If I knew the page, I'd show it to you.
Well, maybe that could be my homework while I'm listening.
It might be somewhere around here. Try that. Okay.
Here's another thing. When they, like you talked about, machining the barrels, the North had a special machine to squeeze the projectile down to the final tolerance. The South didn't have that. So what the South did, they put rings around the projectile called borelettes or borelets. Uh-huh. That way they could machine down just those rings. You didn't use as much tooling. Didn't take much to machine just the rings.
It's kind of like a driving band. It's just
and there's less friction going out the barrel.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
That was a neat invention.
Yeah. All right. Now the fuses there's timed fuse,
Borman fuse,
and then there's
contact fuses. Yeah.
So what's the difference between those two? What is a timed fuse?
The Borman fuse, you need a special tool to cut to tell which way the powder trained to follow, to give you the number of seconds to burn it.
Okay, so you would have to take the projectile before you put it in the tube. You'd have to take the projectile and 3-second fuse or something like that.
Yeah, you have a table of fire under your lid of the ammo chest.
Okay,
gives you degrees of elevation, gives you the flight time, the yardage.
Okay,
That's not perfect, but that's a starting point.
Roughly, right. And so, and they would know if they've got a line of infantry coming at them 1,000 yards away, let's say, and they want to go and blow something up in the face of that line, they would know based on the distance how many seconds roughly it would be that they'd have to cut that down for it to explode in the midst of them or in front of them or something.
And you had to observe it.
Yeah,
You
to
don't
make sure
say
you were right.
This is the seconds because of that chart. You use that as a base, and then you use the judgment of the gunner
Is
to
it
cut the next fuse.
what was it, 1, 3, and 5 second increments, or what were the?
They had one up to going to, I think, a Whitworth, which a 5-mile range could cut it up to like 15 seconds.
Okay, well,
A lot of flight time.
it goes a little further, yeah. So that's the Borman fuse, and then the contact fuses. How do they work?
They had a anvil and a point that would hit the anvil and ignite like a friction primer would ignite the charge inside the projectile.
So it would hit, and then that would hit that cap, and
it
then
wasn't
it
as effective as aerial burst with the time fuse. There's a muffled effect.
because it has to go into the ground,
It
or
goes
it
into the
has to
ground.
hit,
Sometimes the fuse would fail.
right. So then it's just essentially a solid shot.
Yeah.
Doesn't
And
explode.
so a lot of the projectiles were duds.
Okay.
In the business, we call that PD, or projectile dysfunction. No, I just made that up. Don't write that down. Never mind.
Did
Can't do worse than that other episode. So
which other episode?
the one that got you
snorted?
your review.
I did. The one what?
The one that got
The
us
one
our
that we
poor
shall not
review.
speak of.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, that'll probably offend someone. What is this? Oh, this is what they look like. Okay. Yeah, I've seen these. Showing this, or transmit flame. Oh yeah,
So if
there
you're
it is.
following
Okay.
along in Mr. Cole's book, what page is that on?
This would be on page. Oh, thank you. Yeah, 143. There's a picture. Now we're going back to the groove,
Or
the flame
thrower
groove. Yeah,
groove. Is that a technical name?
the flame grower groove thing. You've got the 3-inch Hotchkiss shell here with the groove in it. You can see on page 143 in the book. Okay. So now we've got our fuses. We've got all these things here. How well did all of this stuff perform as artillerymen? Let's start with that in the armies. What was the training? Very in depth. How good were these guys?
You had to really practice. There's a lot of safety procedure you have to follow. Under fire, you have to get used to that. Training is different than being in battle. You can make some big mistakes. If you don't shove the ammo all the way to the back and you have a little space to the back of the projectile, you're telling the explosion to go backwards. That can blow the barrel out.
Yeah.
You can have the front blow out. That's why they put the reinforcing metal in the front or the back to make it safer. But you can have people that weren't artillerymen coming up. They're loaned out from a regiment.
Like infantry.
They didn't have a spare reserve for artillery people. So if you're a regimental commander and are willing to loan out some people to operate a battery, what kind of guys would you free up to loan them out?
What kind of guys would I free up? The ones I
They're
don't
gonna
want to.
be laggards.
Yeah.
You got to keep an eye on.
The ones I could spare.
The worst people that you want, get them out of your regiment, let them work over there someplace.
Right.
In fact, there's an example where in one battle, I forget which one it was, this guy's supposed to load double canister. He had an order, double canister. You don't put 2 powder bags in the same barrel. You're supposed to get one canister, knock the powder bag off the hub, then put everything in with one powder bag.
Right.
Well, that guy, when he knocked the powder bag off, stubbed his fingers on the hub.
Okay.
And every shot after that, double canister, he was putting those 2 rounds in, just like it came from the arsenal. So you can have, it's a Napoleon, you have 5 pounds of gunpowder in that.
Jesus.
That's a lot of powder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing.
So
if you
that's
don't-
the gun that's on by the Bryan farm that's exploded.
Yeah. What's the other one?
Well, another safety thing, if you don't keep all the oxygen in the barrel when you're ramming the powder bag, you could ignite.
I was going to ask you about that. So you'd have to someone on the crew would have to put his thumb over the
It's called a
vent.
thumb stall. It's a leather thing you put on your thumb. You got to push down to where you have no hissing noise. Because when you sponge it out, first to get the sparks out with the sponge and the water, it's like a piston. You're pushing air down. If you don't have your thumb in that vent hole in the back, you're going to allow sparks to hide in that little hole. And then you put a powder bag next, you have some problems. And when he takes the sponge rammer out, it'll suck air back in the vent hole and rekindle any sparks still in there. That was especially important for a rifle gun because you can hide sparks in the grooves.
In the grooves. Okay. And so then the guy who's got to ram the charge down, there's a chance that charge could be touched off while he's still got hold of the ram. What is it called? Is it a rammer?
Sponge rammer.
Sponge. Yeah. Okay. I thought there was a different word
You'll
for
see
it.
his arm flying across the field.
Yeah.
Real.
Jeez. Yeah. So how many times? I think this is a question that a listener has. So I'll wait until we get there.
Okay.
In the heat of battle, did they? First of all. Well, no, I guess I got to ask the question. How many steps would it take to load a gun? How many people did it take to load a gun and continue manning it?
Well, you have 16 men for a cannon. 6 are drivers of the 12 horses. The other 10 are around the cannon or the ammo.
Okay.
You got 4 guys around the cannon, but they're carrying up. They're setting fuses. You have a gunner that's aiming it. You can get by with fewer.
What is it? 9 steps? How many steps is it to load it?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, 9. So they're 9 steps, but when things are getting hot and heavy, could they abbreviate it somehow? Would they abbreviate it somehow?
They would load without sponging.
Load without sponging.
Yeah.
So that's
You're going to get killed by the enemy in front of you or
your own gun.
your own gun.
Yeah, either way, you're going to get killed.
They did it in the first day, did it in the second day, some batteries.
Okay.
Because at some point the gun is so hot that the person with the thumb stall can just take their thumb off of it and it ignites it.
There was accounts of that being done.
Yeah.
What's that, Waylon?
Accounts of that being done. He just lifted up his thumb and
Yeah,
it'd go
let
off.
the oxygen in.
So the barrel is so hot that the heat of that will touch off the powder from just putting the oxygen and lifting your thumb. Amazing.
If you're not sponging with that wet sponge,
the
because
embers
you dip
and-
in water,
God.
you've still got burning pieces of
Yeah.
flannel and stuff
Right.
from the charge before in the breech of the gun.
Crazy. Okay. So here at Gettysburg, there's all the stories about the Confederate overshots before Pickett's
yes.
charge.
I know it will.
Let's get into that too, because I'm interested to hear about this because I've heard a million reasons as to why. And it depends on who you ask. But one person says, "Well, the reason why they overshot so much was because of this," and then another person says, "The reason why they overshot so much was because of that." And couldn't it be all of them? Couldn't it be both? I don't know. What do we got going on here? So what was the
Blaming on the fuses.
fuses? Okay, so they should have blown up
Well,
sooner.
here's the story.
Okay.
I didn't put that in my book. I knew at the time, but I didn't put it in because I didn't really buy it. But prior to the early summer of '63, the Army of Northern Virginia just had the Battle of Chancellorsville. They were using Richmond fuses. To resupply for the next campaign, they had to get them from Selma, Alabama, Charleston, South Carolina. So they did a test after Gettysburg, Richmond Laboratories. They found that the other suppliers' fuses burn a second longer than the Richmond fuses. So that's where that came from.
Okay.
So if you had a 4-second fuse from Selma or Charleston, it burned for 5 seconds compared to the Richmond fuse.
Okay. So you're making all your calculations based on it being a 4-second flight before it explodes.
Yes.
And then it goes on another second and it completely overshot your target.
But who knows how many shorter fuses were burnt using Richmond fuses at Gettysburg, and when did they switch to the 5-second fuse,
Right.
the longer fuses?
Okay.
They didn't all reach in the ammo chest at one time on July 3rd and say, let's pick the longer fuses, the
Right,
longer
right.
burning fuses.
Now, would these fuses be already in the projectile, or would they have to put them in?
Put them in.
So it's not just taking a projectile out and putting it down the barrel. Like you actually have to then screw the fuse in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like a process.
Or if it's a time fuse, you insert it in the threaded capsule or insert there.
Okay. So we're the overshoots. So go ahead. Continue with.
Most complaints are for July 3rd. They already had 2.5 days of gun practice.
Right.
When the weather was clear, less smoke.
Right.
So what you do is when you fire a shot, you observe what you did. They would detect whether the fuse was burning longer or not from the first 2.5 days. They had another chance, July 3rd, the Bliss Farm. There was a cannonade that went on for about a half an hour. Alexander saw this. He's right next to them. He said they shot for a half an hour, 100 guns, but I wouldn't let my cannons fire. He wanted to save them for the cannonade in the afternoon. Now, he had been putting his guns in position since 3 a.m. till mid-morning. So his guns are sitting there. They're in new positions. No test shots. They have a few minutes to guess before the smoke filled the field.
And so that's another problem is they can't see where the shots are landing.
Not after a few minutes.
Right. Because the Union's also firing back eventually, and there's going to be smoke on that end.
And they've already used a good bit of the ammunition they expected to use already. I think going through like private accounts and stuff, what surprises me the most is the way that people talk about, the way that artillerists talk about the sound of the second day. Because there were more cannons firing at the same time on the second day because you have it all the way around the fishhook.
Absolutely.
And it's, it's a sound that's impressing them. They're writing about it in their diaries. And then some of them don't even mention the third day's noise because doesn't surprise them that much as an artillerist.
After the day before.
When you have in cavalry field, the cavalry are talking about it. But it seems like the artillerists seem to talk about the noise of the second day over the noise of the third day before Pickett's charge.
I didn't know that.
So they've already used a lot already.
Yeah.
Okay, one important point I like to make, projectile velocity is ignored. Anytime I've heard any conversation about the Richmond fuses, they don't link it with the projectile's velocity.
Go ahead.
And that's important.
Okay.
Speed, velocity of the shell has a lot to do with the fuse cutting.
So wait, go into that a little bit more.
A rifle projectile.
Explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
Okay, a rifle projectile, little boy.
Those are some awfully mean words you were using earlier.
Traveled a third faster than a smooth bore.
Okay.
So you got to have a lot more precision in cutting the fuses for a rifle projectile.
I see. Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And it was subject to many, many forces. I've got a list of them here. I won't remember them all, but gunpowder's explosive quality varied from different batches from the same mill. From the different mills, changed. Humidity affected it. The way gunpowder converts to a gas.
Mm-hmm.
Heavier atmosphere decreased the friction, or decreased velocity rather, because of the friction on it. Transportation handling affected powder cartridges from Fredericksburg to Gettysburg. They're on bumpy roads. You don't have a suspension system. When you shake gunpowder bags, it's going to get the grains into a smaller configuration.
So it's going to be like a dust at the bottom.
Yes, it's going to actually affect the explosive power.
Right.
Hard ramming, you push it to the back too hard, you're going to do the same thing. You break those powder granules into
God, there's so
smaller.
much that goes into this.
Velocity affected by trajectory. If you aim higher, it's going to take longer to get to your target. Barrel expansion. Napoleon's expanded. When you have bronze, it's going to get bigger in the barrel from long wear. There's some barrels today that have a half-inch diameter bore than when it was manufactured, which means you lose propellant gas.
Right.
Leak more around the ball in there.
I think you have a diagram in the book that shows the gas going over, and it like pushes the ball down on the bottom of the barrel, and that creates kind of a groove.
A burr, yeah.
A burr. right.
burr, and it hits the top, hits down, hits up.
So it bounces, and then when it comes out of the muzzle, like you're like same thing with muskets. You're gonna have a more accurate shot with a rifle than you will with a smoothbore because of this bounce.
Yes.
This bounce, because you don't know if it's going to be on the upswing or the downswing when it comes out, right?
Yeah.
So you can, okay, gotcha.
Vent wear, that's another big one. That's the first thing to wear out on a barrel.
The vent.
Whether it's a rifled or a smoothbore.
Because that's brass.
That's where all the explosion takes place, especially on a rifle gun because it captures all that explosive power.
Yeah.
So if that vent wear gets bigger, you're going to lose more of that explosive power.
And the vent it's not just a hole in the barrel, it's a hole that you screw in.
You either screw it in or they drill it in.
Okay.
Now, if it gets too big, they'll plug that up and drill another hole. If you go out to Slocum's statue, the Napoleon below that has like 5 vent holes drilled into it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I got to go look at that.
Right at the base
you know
of
that?
Slocum.
I didn't know.
Yeah, I got to go see that.
Check it out.
I'm gonna.
You got rust buildup in the barrel. Projectile shape variations create a different air resistance, reaction to different twist rates of rifling, smoke. We often forget the smoke.
Yeah.
Keep forgetting the smoke. How come they can't aim? What's smoke, stupid?
You got to be able to see what you're shooting at.
So really, honestly, Phil, everything you're talking about right now makes sense to me from like a modern day target shooting standpoint. You know, if you want to really compete as a target shooter now, you have to have incredibly consistent ammunition. That means you're using the same propellant from the same batch for every round. It is weighed out to like the milligram per casing. All of your casings have to be the exact same dimensions so that you're not getting a different ability for the gas to expand in the casing when you actually fire it, which is going to change how fast the bullet travels down the barrel. Throat erosion, that's kind of the same as vent erosion. All that hot gas that's coming out of the casing and is also coming out of the artillery cartridge is burning that iron away. So it's not so much like friction doing it so much as it's legitimately being burned away by superheated gases that are traveling at high speed.
You said throat erosion?
Yeah, so like in a modern rifle barrel, most of them, the way you headspace around, which is, you know, how deep into the barrel it actually goes before it fires, they're all headspaced off of the throat, which is where, if you've seen a bullet cartridge, like the end of the casing where the bullet is, gets narrower. That's the throat.
The throat.
Yeah.
Crimps the bullet into the shell, basically, right? It's what holds it in there?
Yeah, it's all in the same place, but there's a throat machined into the actual chamber of the barrel as well. So if you've got like super powerful belted magnum ammunition, you've got a higher chamber pressure that's wearing away that throat in the barrel faster, which means you're not headspacing properly, which means your bullet isn't seating in the rifling at the right time anymore. And so that has to do with barrel life. And anymore, you just, you get a different barrel once that one's shot out and you get a new one.
A lot goes into this stuff. But basically,
everything that he's talking about, if you're familiar with modern day target shooting, all of this makes perfect sense.
Yeah, no, it does. So, but what you're saying is that, are you saying that this is stuff that they at the time either didn't know or didn't take into consideration, or
knew it and
they might have known it, but they couldn't
do anything about it.
There's nothing you can do about it.
Well, I mean, there's certain things that are obvious, like the smoke thing. Obviously, you know that. What about the? I've heard that the trails of the guns would, dig a rut.
When that recoils, it drags the trail back. You'll dig a channel of dirt, which means the front gets higher. Right. Every time you fire it, the shock of the explosion makes the elevating screw a little bit higher.
And if you can't
correct it, you can't see the enemy.
Even if you could see the enemy, let's say,
well, then you can make some corrections.
Then you can make you would change the elevation of the barrel.
You want an aerial burst anyhow. You do the most damage.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So, you have more there? Go ahead if you got more.
Let me see.
I mean, he's got a whole book on the table in front of you.
Yeah, let's just pick a random page.
Human error.
Okay, yeah.
It's easy to blame it on the fuses if you're aiming wrong.
Sure.
A Confederate in A.P. Hill's outfit said on July the 3rd, they're cutting fuses for 1.25 miles. It's less than a mile to the line.
And you're talking about cutting fuses. I don't think we covered this at all in this episode yet.
Go for it.
You know, you've got the difference between a Borman fuse and a plug fuse.
Well, you have a time fuse with the number of seconds graduated on it, or you have the Borman fuse. You needed a tool to cut the powder train.
And you're legitimately sawing off that plug fuse to the right length and shoving that into the shell, as opposed to what he's talking about with a Borman fuse. It's a pewter disc that gets screwed into the front of the shell, and then you punch a hole at the right second.
The one you're talking about, the first one, is the length of it dictates how long it burns for. Basically,
if you're off a quarter of a second, you're off like 100 yards.
Yeah.
And everything I just described and you folks described, we're talking about 1 second complaint going 1 to 200 yards behind the Union line.
Yeah.
1 second. And all these things I just went over could affect it
by a lot.
Many more than others. So anyhow, that's my take on overshots.
Okay. All right. Well, so we've got, I think, a pretty good idea of how all this worked and everything. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a little break, and we're going to come back, and we have questions from our patrons over at patreon.com/AddressingGettysburg. And we're going to ask Phil these questions, and he's going to answer them, and we're going to go on our merry way after that. So we'll be right back. For the Historian has a wide variety of titles, new and used, of military books from publishers like Osprey, Gettysburg Publishing, Stackpole, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more. I make it a point to go there once a week because I have new bookshelves to fill, and I never know what treasures I'll find, and neither will you. They even have toy soldiers, model kits, games, children's books, and more. So stop by and check them out on your next visit to Gettysburg, or better yet, order right now online at forthehistorian.com and mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund you your shipping. And if you call 717-685-5207 or stop by the store on your next visit and mention us, you'll get 20% off retail price. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207. Hey, we all love a great-looking t-shirt, am I right? And we really love Gettysburg. Well, there's an online store called Heritage Depot that you need to check out. It's where you can find all kinds of really well-designed t-shirts, sweatshirts, artwork, and other great stuff featuring our favorite battlefield. The owner's a good friend of Addressing Gettysburg, and I can tell you, he's put together some of the best-looking stuff we've ever seen. His website is heritage-depot.com, and I know you're going to like what they've got over there. So be sure to use the code AG63 at checkout, and you'll get 15% off your purchase. That's heritage-depot.com, AG63 for 15% off. Tell you what, this might come in handy if the lockdowns continue throughout the winter. Plowman Cider is a proud sponsor of Addressing Gettysburg and wants to offer our listeners the chance to bring Adams County's delicious agricultural countryside to the comfort of your own home this winter. Grown and fermented on Plowman's 7th-generation family farm, their heirloom and bittersweet apple varieties will soothe you right down to the ground. You can get Plowman Cider on Gettysburg's historic Lincoln Square at their tap room, or have it shipped to your home by visiting plowmancider.com. Addressing Gettysburg listeners can use the coupon code CIDERPOD at checkout to enjoy 15% off your order. So put a taste of Adams County in your glass this winter with Plowman Cider. Go to plowmancider.com and use promo code CIDERPOD for 15% off. That's PLOUGHMANCIDER.com. GettysBikeTours.com. You must be 21 years of age and shipping is subject to your state's regulation. Hey everyone, GettysBike Tours has something special for you. It's a special offer that they've got going on. If you call 717-752-7752 and you make a reservation by April 20th of 2021, you're going to get 15% off the tour reservation. Now, this is for tours only, not for rentals. So you got to make sure that you call 717-752-7752 before or by April 20th to receive that 15% off of your tour. Your tour can be any time in the 2021 season, but you got to make the reservation by April 20th. 15% off, you got to call 717-752-7752. Someone will get back to you if they don't pick up, and you will let them know that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg, and they'll give you 15% off. You know how I know this? Because it was my idea. Think outside the bus. 717-752-7752. That's 717-752-7752 for those of you who prefer it that way. 717-752-7752. Gettysburg, a nation divided. The battle that changed America. Avatars, generals, artifacts, games, 360-degree views, an immersive battlefield experience. A new way to discover history. Gettysburg, a nation divided, an augmented reality narrated by Scott Eastwood. Download it from your phone's app store today and support Addressing Gettysburg by entering GBurg1863 in the referral code prompt after downloading. Do you have a local business in Gettysburg? Do you want to reach people who are itching to visit us, but don't know exactly where to stay, where to eat, or what to do while they're here? Well, then you should consider advertising on Addressing Gettysburg. You can reach thousands of Gettysburg enthusiasts per month who are within a 4 to 8 hour drive of us, as well as all over the world. Reach them where they are before they're already in town. This is the more affordable and more 21st century way to advertise. So contact us at advertise@addressinggettysburg.com for more information. That's advertise@addressinggettysburg.com.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Callery.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you. That was very kind of you. We are back. Before we get to our questions from our patrons, Jessie tells me she's got some show and tell, which is going to be interesting because the listeners can't see anything. Sorry, Jess. The listeners can't see anything.
Here I am. Okay.
So what
Mostly
is your...
tell, some show.
All right, tell it. Show us and tell the audience.
So, my grandmother passed away in November, but this is part of my inheritance.
Well, first, let me say we all send our condolences to you.
Oh, thank you very much.
On behalf of the audience and myself. What were you doing?
Stop turning me off, Eric.
Oh, okay. See, if you had
Right
your
in the middle
mute
of
button
my
hooked up.
tribute to my grandmother. So she and my grandfather were active in the West York Historical Society because they lived in the large house on Taxville Road that has a wooden sculpture of a soldier and their dog out front. Do you know which one?
A soldier and the soldier's dog, or your grandparents' dog?
It is just, don't know really where the dog came from, but it's just,
Okay.
well, their house was used as a hospital when Jubal Early's troops
Gotcha.
went through.
Okay.
So there was a lot of detritus left in the yard when they left to come to Gettysburg. And she had a friend through the Historical Society that dug the property. And her neighbor, which is just down the road, gave her this,
She's reaching down under the table now, ladies and gentlemen. There she is.
which is an Easter basket full of canister shot that was left on the property.
Oh.
This, I don't think, is a projectile, but that's what we'll talk about next.
Well, let's see. I'm going to hand this over to Phil. This is
So I learned that there are several different sizes of canister.
Sure.
So I
Yes.
guess this is medium.
So she's got a basket, a little, what would you call that, wicker basket?
It's very heavy, so I don't know if I'm going to pass this around.
Well,
So, and then a very heavy object that appears at first glance to be a 6-pound projectile.
right.
But there's only one 6-pound gun at
And it
Gettysburg.
wasn't with Early?
And it was not with Jubal Early's troops. And so I showed this to the guy, whoever runs the Facebook account at the Horse Soldier, and he said it's probably a gate weight.
I was going to say,
So
looks like a gateway, yeah.
So the man who found it told my grandmother, that it's probably a live shell, and just not to get it near heat. But she had it sort of
so you
near
have it
the
right by our
fireplace.
propane heater.
Right. So this is how we're going to figure it out. I'm just going to sit it. But yeah, I guess
Acid and gasoline and light it on fire.
Yeah, there you go.
it
see
is
that
very
again.
similar in size.
It is, but it's not. I see. Oh, yeah. No. Oh, no. What do you think, Phil? What's your verdict on this thing?
The only thing I could think of would be grape, but that wasn't used here.
Would grape be that big?
Yeah, standard grape.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge.
I don't think it is, but
No, but yeah.
Well, I'm
the
not going to
size of it.
throw it away.
No, don't throw it away. It's still a cool thing to have.
And then we have a box I'll bring over some other time with a bunch of pieces of rifles and stuff.
So how much? Let me see. Just hold on. Let me see that basket. How much?
So there was 32 balls in a canister load of Napoleon. Mm-hmm. But there are more than 32 balls in there.
Okay.
So kind of odd that there were. I mean, I don't know if they got all of it, but it was all found in a pile.
Man, could you
Mother load.
imagine like a handful of this flying at you? That's crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy.
Yeah, I brought it on a tour.
The whole thing?
Earlier this year with a bunch of kids that were getting like homeschooled field trip, and I gave each of one of them a ball, and then I'm like, oh, make sure you put them all back. And the parents were like checking their hands, like, oh, I never thought they'd like keep it. I didn't count ahead of time.
Little thieves.
But I guess they're all there.
Well, I mean, enough of them are there. Does it really matter if one or two got away, right?
But it definitely, when you feel how heavy it is, right? You just imagine.
Yeah. No, it does not look fun. And Phil,
Very unfortunate.
was
day.
somebody, we had a guest on, do you remember who this was that said that they used to skip the canister to flatten it? And do you remember this?
Oh God, who was that?
Well, have you heard
Was that
that?
Lewis?
Yeah.
I think that was
I think
Lewis.
it was
Trott.
Lewis.
I explained that on one of my tours.
They would, so explain that more,
we
because
didn't
he
get
just
into
said it in passing.
If you're firing out of a Napoleon, the smooth bore, there's going to be a cone-shaped pattern.
Like
Okay.
a shotgun.
Yeah, some will go over the enemy's head.
Right.
But if you fire out and hit the ground first, they flatten it out, they all go in the enemy.
So they
They can
flatten instead
They
of
hit
being
the ground. It
they-
flattens it.
but they're skimmed. So they'll flatten and then they'll.
You don't want them flying over the enemy's head.
You're not physically flattening the individual projectiles.
They're flattening
that cone
the-
of fire
the-
is
the
becoming
cone-shaped
Right,
pattern.
right.
Yeah.
So then, I got you. So it's not a round pattern; it's a
Cone.
line,
Yeah.
right? So when you're flattening out the pattern by firing into
The
the
ground, in
ground,
front of
and
it.
it's going to skim into the legs or whatever of the.
Now, if it's a rifle, the spiral grooves, there's a centrifugal force is going to disperse them too quickly.
Okay.
And you want to get them at the outer range, so you lost that power at the outer range.
Okay.
The Napoleon had double the killing power of a rifle cannon.
Because they can get more balls in.
Yeah, and it's the pattern.
That's the way it works. Okay. Well, let's get on to some questions from our listeners. I think Phil's sick of my questions for tonight,
keep
right?
them coming.
These listeners, they are our patrons over at patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. If you'd like to submit questions for our guides to answer on these Ask a Guides, and you get exclusive content to take a closer look at all things Gettysburg and Gettysburg-related things and stuff and whatnot, and please consider joining us over on Patreon today. That's patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. Okay, first one. Richard Fish. He says, thanks, Matt, for addressing artillery. The performance of Union artillery seems an essential factor in the outcome of the Battle of Gettysburg. Did the organization and use of artillery at the battle differ from how the Army of the Potomac operated earlier? For example, were there differences between Malvern Hill, Antietam, and Gettysburg regarding artillery organization? Or were there differences between artillery use in the Western armies and the Army of the Potomac? That's Richard Fish.
Okay, Richard, thanks for your question. Well, at the beginning of the war, the Union Army had a standing army. It had a fixed organizational structure, but developing the artillery branch was yet to be laid. You needed an efficient chain of command, organizational structure that fulfilled artillery's role and maximized its firepower. Early on, the duties of chief artillery were vague. Two distinct theories. One was if you're in charge of the artillery, you know the expertise, where to place the gun, get your field of fire, how to prepare a site, where you're going to fall back to. Infantry commanders were more concerned with their own infantry soldiers. But the infantry commanders said, okay, who's in charge? Who's going to get blamed if we fail? I will. So they're arguing about having an artillery guy giving commands and the infantry commander in the same area. So McClellan in March of 62 said, from now on, the duties of the chief of artillery are purely administrative. But they still argued that for the rest of the war. We've had problems here at Gettysburg. Hancock and Hunt were arguing about who's going to control when to fire, to cease fire.
Right.
Got into bitter arguments about it. Okay, what else?
All right. Well, the next guy we got is Mike Lentz. He says, I appreciate you doing an episode dedicated to just artillery. Me
I'm
being
not done with the first.
Oh, you're not? Oh, I thought you were saying what else? Like, get on to the next question.
No, I'm talking to myself.
It's like, hit me again.
All right.
Don't talk to yourself. Talk to me.
Talking
All
to
right, go
a
ahead.
comedy show here. So when the war started, there were 6 guns to 1,000 soldiers. But towards the end of the war, there was 1 or most 2 to 1,000 men. So they didn't want the green troops in the beginning to be fighting without some confidence with the cannons firing amongst them.
Okay.
So that was a reason. At the beginning of the war, they had a lot of unserviceable calibers, unusual weapons. Neither army was prepared to fight and operate with troops up to 100,000. So they had to create new manuals, I mentioned before, tables of fire, instructions. There was only one person in the whole United States that controlled more than 2,000 men when the war broke out. That was Winfield Scott.
Okay.
And he's getting
He's not here.
overweight
Yeah.
and of age.
Right.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, now you're done. Okay. Thank you. Mike Lentz, he says, I appreciate you doing an episode dedicated to just artillery. Me being a sucker for loud noises and the subsequent hearing loss. I love the artillery. Me too, Mike. Therefore, I have more than a few questions. Well, I'm going to ask 2 of them, Mike, because we've covered some of the other ones already. He wants to know, what is the difference between light artillery and heavy artillery? That's the first question I'm going to ask.
Easy. Light artillery had guns light enough to keep up with a moving army. Somewhere on the borderline at Gettysburg, like the 20-pound Parrots, their barrels weighed almost a ton. You know the weight of the wheels for one cannon? The limbers, the caissons?
Just the wheel?
The wheels that went with one cannon.
I'm going to guess. Well,
How many wheels
Like
do you
the
think
carriage
went with a
overall has got to weigh, for a
Yeah.
20-pounder's got to be close to a ton of oak. I know.
But you just
it's-
you're just asking what the wheel weighs.
cannon? Yeah. How many wheels to each cannon? 2 limbers, one
Well,
caisson.
so
the
that's,
cannon.
what, 6?
9.
9?
9.
12, 14. So a wheel, I'm going to guess is...
So you've got 2 wheels on the gun, 2 wheels on the limber.
He's asking about one. Why are we
One
multiplying
cannon.
wheels?
One
One
cannon.
Oh, one cannon.
Watch my lips.
I don't know. What is what does it cost? Or what does it weigh?
I shouldn't have asked the question. I don't want to talk about it.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I've been locked in my house for 2 days.
9 wheels.
9 wheels.
Each wheel weighs almost 200 pounds.
So I was going to say 200 on
That's
one
all-
wheel.
You've got 1,800 pounds.
That's
of
almost
wheels.
a ton of wheels.
Okay, a ton of
Yeah.
wheels alone.
And plus the carriage that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And then whatever you have in
So
the
anyhow,
cases, and then you've got...
Ammunition.
Yeah.
So the whole thing, 2 6-horse teams are pulling 4 tons.
Wow.
So the average lifespan of
crazy.
artillery horse was 7.5 months. The work
So I
of
guess
the
the
death.
moral of the story is the light artillery wasn't really that light.
No. The big complaint was
No.
they didn't put the weight evenly on the harnesses. That was one of the big
Okay.
complaints. They didn't take enough care to distribute the weight. Okay, I'm done.
Poor animals.
Next.
Okay. Okay, next. When studying the battle, it is difficult to miss the accounts that speak about the use of double canister. How often did artillery batteries use double canister?
That was a last-ditch effort.
Okay.
You don't shoot at long range beyond 400 yards, it's not worth much. Only a few rounds were stocked in the ammo chest. 12-pound Napoleon carried only 4 rounds in each chest. Rifled, carried 5 rounds. So that's the last ditch effort.
Right, because that's only effective, within 300 yards or how far? 400? 400? Yeah, okay.
But you run out of canister, you're going to stick in rocks and nails and parts of chains, even bayonets.
Whatever you could get your hands on.
So on that note, Wayne Waxmuth, who I think just recently passed,
Yes. Yeah.
he told a story that was on PCN years ago about the 9th Massachusetts Battery and talking about rotten shot. Now, he describes it as being a shell or a case that they had just pulled the fuse out of and left that fuse hole open and fired it as like kind of ad hoc canister. Is that a thing? Like, did that actually happen?
Not often, but I did mention it in the book someplace.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, we talked about all those duds here.
Sure.
Half the shells were duds. There's a reason for that. Some were deliberate duds. When I was doing research in the book at the National Archives, one of my fellow guides, Jim Klaus, pointed out that there's a microfilm of the Union's inventory for the Army of the Potomac the day before Gettysburg. So I looked it up. It's pre-printed with the figures written in. We know how many cannons were here, how many different projectiles, how many different fuses, how many different friction primers, how many feed bags for their horses, how many anvils, how much blacksmith coal, how much paint, how many keys for the ammo chest. But there's one column that had nothing in it.
Let me guess.
What?
Solid shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not one rifled solid shot was here for the Union Army.
Yeah.
So what you can do, you can take a projectile that explodes, don't arm it with a fuse, and you got almost the same thing.
It's still hollow, though.
It is. It's not the same thing, but
Right.
it's almost the same thing. You can't get a solid bolt and convert it to an explosive, but
Right.
you do the opposite by not
I mean,
arming
if you
with
shoot
a
it
fuse.
into a line of troops,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
essentially going to do the same thing
Well,
anyway.
the first
So
guy wouldn't care. But I thought that was interesting.
yeah,
Gave him versatility.
Yeah, that's neat. I've never heard
and
of that.
lighten the load a bit.
Yeah.
Would they have just had that many more other types of rounds, or
Yeah, well, let me go through. 12-pounder chest, you had 32 rounds, 12 shot, 12 spherical case, 4 shells, 4 canister. Rifled chest had 50 rounds, 25 shells, 20 shrapnel, and 5 canister.
So it seems to me that when soldiers talk about double canister, it's something that maybe the infantry hear from the artillerists, and they're writing it down because it's indicative of the desperation of, it's a way to measure how desperate the fight was. Kind of like, when we talk about trying to cross the wheat field and not stepping on, ground, being able to cross the field, stepping on the bodies. That's something that comes up in multiple battles. It just is a way to describe how thick, the fight was. But that it just seems like that's something that gets...
Yeah.
it's poetic.
Right.
Clark's New Jersey battery used triple canister out at the peach orchard. That's dangerous. The more weight you put in the barrel to fire, the more it's going to kick back,
Sure.
break your axle, your wheels.
But that's
What
desperate.
designed for that?
Yeah.
Last ditch.
What's that,
At
Waylon?
that point, you don't care.
You don't care. No, you don't care at that point. Here's one that he's also got there that I missed before. But what types of cannons were favored by the horse artillery? Would they prefer, or did they not prefer?
Oh, they did. 3-inch
did.
ordnance rifles by far.
Lighter.
Lighter, more reliable. They didn't blow up like Parrots.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and they're not really supposed to be fighting at close range.
You're right. Yeah.
Right. Gotcha. Let's see. Oh, I didn't put this person's name, so I forgive you, or forgive me. I beg your pardon to the questioner out there. I know most, if not all, of the officers were trained West Point or similar in artillery. But what about the rest of the team? it took to operate a battery. Were they all regulars? Did they pull volunteers from the infantry and train them on the job? Curious as to the makeup of the soldiers it took to operate the guns. So we kind of touched on this before, but if you want to go into a little more detail about this, were they all trained gunners or were they a mix match?
Yeah, you need a lot of practice going through the different steps.
It also sounds to me like not only do you need the practice going through the steps, but you need to have an education on the science of it all and why you have to do all these things. I mean, there's a lot more to it.
Good people, good with wood, working with metal.
Right.
You got a lot of parts you have to replace, repair, and mathematics. Trajectories. And
yeah, you can't get the grades that I got in geometry and stuff and operate a battery, run a battery. I could maybe ram the charge down the barrel, but I'm not the guy in charge of that gun. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
But okay. Kevin Randolph, what was the typical failure rate of ordnance, and did it vary from Union to Confederate artillery?
Well, we talked about the failure rate, 55%, according to the sign in the visitor center. They had a case with unexploded shells mixed with shells that did explode. It said 55% were duds. I don't know how they knew that.
Right.
I used that as a source. They didn't go around picking up exploded, unexploded. I mean, there's still a lot of buried, a couple feet down in the earth.
Sure.
So I don't know where they came with that figure, but that's the only source I had for that.
Okay. So 55% were...
Some were deliberate duds. I don't know the ratio of deliberate and ones that just failed.
In the writing, do the artillerists, when they're writing diaries or whatever, do they say that they deliberately? Do we have a lot of cases here at Gettysburg that we know that they use them as deliberate duds?
It was promulgated about using.
So it was a rule to use an explosive shell as a solid shot, and then it was just up to you and the situation that you were in. Yeah. John Reynolds has one question. Considering the distance involved and the smoke that made it hard to see, how did the gun crew know their shots were hitting their targets? So, even though it was particularly smoky on the third day at Gettysburg and everything, there were other battles where there was some wind, but there was still a lot of smoke, right? Yeah. So you could see ghostly figures or something like that. How would they gauge that?
Well, if you could see the target, you start off with the table of fire as a starting point. But the table is only as good as the enemy being on the same plane as you are. Are you listening to this, or are you going to ask me again?
I'm listening. I had to plug in my computer. I forgot to plug it in.
So anyhow, the value of a table of fire is sketchy. Table did not consider the fact that guns of the same model and caliber made by different manufacturers did not perform the same. Some tables didn't provide information precise enough to calculate the accuracy. When smoke obscured the field, you're pretty much out of luck. Colonel Alexander to Longstreet before Pickett's charge summed it up. He said, "I will only be able to judge the effect of our fire on the enemy by his return fire. So if his infantry is but little exposed to view, and the smoke will obscure the whole field." So you're guessing. You're wasting ammunition. You're firing through the smoke. One officer kept screaming, every time you fire that, it costs $2.67.
Okay.
Next.
Next is Charles Fuller. As someone who has an ancestor who served with the Danville Artillery from 2nd Manassas through Gettysburg, I often wondered what my ancestor's role as an artillerist would have been and what danger he faced. I know in general there were several positions in manning a gun, number 1, 2, 3, etc. In that light, I'm curious as to your opinion what the most dangerous position was in manning a gun, and also what made that particular position so dangerous. Charles Fuller. There it goes.
All right, Charles, thank you. For airburst, exposure to danger was equally bad for the whole gun crew. Small arms, the guy in the front probably gets shot first, right?
Yeah.
So other than that, the most dangerous job, we talked about the number 1 man. He's sponging, he's loading the projectile at the back because of the danger, the safety procedure.
Right.
Number 3 tended to vent. If you didn't shut it off, oxygen, sparks, explosion. So I would say number 1.
Number 1.
But overall, the artillery guys were the gutsiest men in the Army. They have to put up with the heat, deafening roar, midst of exploding metal fragments and sparks. Communication was next to impossible. They're unsheltered. They're behind stone walls or hardwood trees. That's dangerous to be around. Hardwood will splinter. Stone walls, they're like a hand grenade if an enemy ball hits that. And they're visible to the enemy until the smoke fills the field.
You also have, like Latimer's battalion, there's the stories of the men having to go around shooting the horses because they were flailing and the other men were getting caught up in all the rigging and everything.
In the leather.
Yeah. I mean, you got the horses or another thing and the caissons exploding. And what's that?
Horses will kick you to death if you're trapped in the leather.
Sure.
That's why the artillery guys carry pistols, not to shoot at the enemy, but to kill the horses.
It's like a really sad routine at the end of a day of battle. They have to walk through and decide which horses they can,
bend,
save, or which ones they've got to.
Yeah. That sucks.
As if the battle wasn't enough.
Right. Now they got to go kill their horses.
So talking about gutsy artillery guys, when they attacked East Cemetery Hill, the Louisiana Tigers, those artillerymen are on the Baltimore Pike holding up fence rails to stop the infantry, their own infantry, from retreating. At the same time, they're taking food out of the knapsacks. That's gutsy. Here's another gutsy account. During Pickett's charge at Cowan's Battery, there's a man by the name of James Plunkett in the battery. When he saw the Union troops running to the rear, including some officers, it made him mad. He picked up a coffee pot and he smashed this guy in the top of the head with a pot. The bottom caved in. The guy's running the rear with a coffee pot around his head. So these artillery guys are in positions they probably should not have been at that point in the battle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you would, I used to think that if I had to be in the Army, I'd go in the artillery because you're always in the back, but no, man.
Everybody's hiding behind the ridges, behind the stone walls.
I don't want to be, and you're a target for other artillery.
Yeah.
No, you go in the cavalry. You don't have to walk anywhere.
Here we go.
You get to stay clean.
Here we
Nobody
go.
shoots at you.
No, here we go. This anti-cavalry
I have
bias.
a blood feud with the cavalry film.
Yeah, you got to take care of that animal too.
Yeah.
This is I won't stand for this anti-cavalry bias. It's awful. Go ahead, Phil. Oh no, you want me to go?
Sure.
Waylon Jennings asked, how accurate and effective was the Whitworth bolt? Were gunners able to fully exploit that accuracy? So the Whitworth, you mentioned them before, but we didn't go into them. They're different. They're rifled pieces, but they're different in a big way. And what is that difference?
They fired about 5 miles, loaded from the rear. Breech
That's
loaders.
what I was looking for, yeah.
The Union Army had them. They didn't like them. You had to have a special machine to make the projectile itself. Oh. Because if you have to spin that thing, it's spun, I think I mentioned, 6 times faster than a regular rifle. That's a big shock on a shell.
Yeah.
So you have to give it positive traction going out there.
Okay.
So if it's a bolt, I don't know if you can see where that thing hits. Bolts don't make an explosion. You might see dust kicked up. And if the guys on the receiving end are near that where it hit, they could care less what kind of shell blew up the dust next to them. So I really don't have any information on how much damage that did.
Okay. But so the breech loading part of the gun, though, go into that because this is new, right? Is this a new type of technology?
It's loaded from the rear, but sometimes that breech leaked gas out, and they had to seal it up anyhow. So you had to load it from the front. You got to push that projectile, that rifle projectile, down those spiral grooves all the way to the back of the barrel.
Yeah, and unlike a 3-inch ordnance round or a Parrot gun, the bolt on the, and maybe the shell too, I don't know, but the bolt on Whitworth was actually made specifically to fit in.
Yeah, there's a picture of it in the book there.
Yeah, they're made to mechanically fit the rifling.
Right, so
like
it's
rifle.
It's just it catches in the groove as opposed to it being a smooth thing like a regular shell that we're used to seeing. This is actually grooved. It's a grooved bolt.
Imagine the friction on that pushing all that metal in such a quick spin going across the skies.
Yeah, no, that's crazy.
And
Yeah,
another
okay.
thing, the vent on a cannon is usually in the back, top, rear of the cannon.
Yeah.
Go to one of the Whittlers out at the Peace Light, they're in the back. And one has a device that captures that friction prime when it flew out. If you didn't have that device on the back, that'll go through the guy behind it like a bullet.
Yeah, it's like that weird oval kind of shield that's
It's a protector.
hanging off the back of the breech.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Okay, did you ask us? Did we get his question? I know I asked it, but I
Yes,
took
it
you
was
off.
about
Did you?
accuracy.
Are you talking to me?
All right.
the end of it,
Speaking of that, no, we got two more, or no, one more.
do?
Yeah, we got one more. Joey D. Joey D asks, were there any artillery rounds that exploded on impact at the time of the Battle of Gettysburg? That's what he wants
Contact.
to know.
Sure.
So
Contact.
we did have
Yeah.
those. Okay. So yes, Joey, we did. All right. Eddie, from the Peanut Gallery, Waylon, Veronica, any questions for Phil about artillery tonight before we depart?
I've got one if you don't.
Okay, well then here we go to Jessie Wheedleton. Take it away.
So, Phil, what inspired you to write a book on artillery?
I like technical things. One of my favorite programs, How It's Made. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
I love the technology, the inventions, how people come up with ideas and machines to make things, processes. So I like that part of it. I'm more interested into which regiment was lined up in this brigade going across a field. That to me, I can't really give you a lot of information on that off the top of my head. So I like the technology part of it.
Gotcha.
The technology is interesting, although it did make my eyes go crossed a few times when you were explaining things. I will admit.
Well, and you think in the artillery, that's where the people mesh with the technology, I would say.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, and you'd have to be a little smarter, I would guess, than the average bear to be in the artillery, because you got to kind of understand how this stuff works. It's a lot of science. Science is too confusing.
I would imagine that's why when they were commissioning a new class of officers at West Point, the smartest guys were engineers.
Yeah.
And the next smartest guys were artillerymen.
Yeah, drive those trains.
Who was at the bottom?
Oh, God. Here we go.
And they call me out, the infantry.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Phil, for coming on and doing this.
It's a pleasure.
I'd like to
Thanks for
thank
having
Tim
me.
Smith also, because he suggested that we get in touch with you. So, Tim Smith,
you,
thank you
Tim.
very much for that. And thank all of you for listening. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Wallon. Thank you, Jessie Wheedleton, for coming in.
Yeah.
Jessie, you did a pretty good job. I got to tell you, you're really coming out of your shell. You were really nervous the first time you came on, ever. And you were nervous the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time. And finally now you're kind of like, hey,
Can we just go back and critique all of my episodes? Do you want
we're going to do that on Patreon. We're going to listen to all of Jessie's episodes and critique her with her sitting here in the room.
On live video.
Yeah. No, but thank you for doing this. You did pretty good. And if you want to do it again, you're absolutely welcome to anytime you want. What else? Don't forget to like and share and subscribe and all that stuff on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Turn on those notifications. And please consider becoming a patron today over at patreon.com/AddressingGettysburg. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, have a good one. All right, there it is.
Our hearts so stout have got us fame, for soon 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Garryowen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Garryowen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down